So, we'll put it bluntly. We got our clocks cleaned in South Carolina. Okay. Over, done with. Got Super Tuesday coming up tomorrow. We'll see what happens there. We're expecting to win some. We're expecting to lose some. We're expecting to be representative in all, I think, 11 states that are on the calendar for tomorrow. And we'll go from there. But in the meantime, I got a call from Al Robinson, who's going to be with us. Good friend of Progressive Soup, Al Robinson, is going to join us on the 14th. So that should broadcast on the March 16th and or March 17th. So it'd be good to have Al Robinson back to talk about local politics. Apparently a lot of stuff going on locally. And, welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. We're got our soup bowls handy. And with us, we've got a good friend of the show. He's become a great friend over the last 2 or 3 months, Joe Niola. And we're going to talk about a couple of things. We're going to talk about a production that Joe's working on for May. We're going to talk a little bit about the primaries and caucuses on the horizon on the Democratic Party side. We may even talk about some of the stuff going on the Republican side, because they've got all kinds of crazy quandaries going on and how to deal with a fellow named Don Trump. And we also could talk about celebrity endorsements. Joe is an actor. He's celebrity of local stature. And he's done some great videos. And if you look on the internet, you'll find him. If you look under his name, Joe Niola.
Well, I think you'd find it under mass deportation, 11 million, and then Joe.
Yep. He's done some great things about immigration and the value of immigration and how immigrants are so important to America. And
the consequences, the actual financial consequences of removing them, and how that, number one, affects the economy. And it's amazing when you run the numbers. Kicking them out doesn't really solve the problem. If anything, it hurts the deficit, and it doesn't do anything for the Social Security Trust Fund. Check that video out. 11 million, Joe, mass deportation, sponsored by Mr. Zuckerberg, and produced by Michael Skolnick, and the script and a good deal of the work done, directed by Paula Mendoza. So that would be something to take a look at. It's incredibly in line with the man that I endorse, Mr. Bernie Sanders, who I hope will be our next president. You had mentioned that theater stuff that I'm doing now. Just as the churches, the synagogues right now are in trouble. They're not getting the same kind of support they got in the past. Apparently organized religion, for the most part, is not a popular concern in this day and age. So, like I say, the churches are kind of struggling. And I'm doing what I can to fundraise, and we're putting together a couple of shows. Godspell is one of them. That's the last weekend in April. Godspell at St. John's Episcopal Church on 82 Spring Street in South Salem. So check that one out. That's a terrific show.
I believe that's that's where we first met, when we had the group.
Yeah, we met. We met.
Yeah, when we got together and we talked about Bernie Sanders' campaign back in, I think it was September or October. Might have been September, and I videotaped 7 or 8.
That's a great show.
I mean, 7 or 8 folks just sitting around talking about the issues and about our candidate Bernie Sanders, and it was I think it's worth looking at.
Yeah, YouTube. What is it? Progressive Soup, right?
You can find it on Progressive Soup on Facebook, YouTube. Kristen 40, Kristin 40. Shout out to my sweetness, Kristen. And that's
how we met. Yeah, and it's a delightful little space that we were able to transform. And then later in May, the second and third weekends in May, we got a one-act show, series of one acts. I say 9.5 because some of them are pretty short and they're real zingers. Lots of laughs and a great way to support the church. One in particular is an award-winning play written by Robin Joseph called Welcome to Norway. It had won awards for Best Actor, and it did win an award for Best Short Play up at the Garrison Festival in New York. It's well worth seeing. Another play, Tell Me a Story, written by Albie Gorn. Albie is he's a noted, published, and won a number of awards for his plays. He wrote this one a while back, but he wasn't able to produce it because it required the talent of a 10-year-old. And he discovered the girl that can play the part, and now we'll be doing that. That will be done in South Salem. It'll be done in Armonk. It'll be done in Garrison. But catch it in South Salem. That's St. John's Episcopal Church, South Salem, New York. 5 miles from Richfield, worth the trip. You'll have a delightful evening. But let's move on.
That's great, and it's good to see, especially small churches, because small churches run, small church v. large church synagogue runs pretty much the same issues as small business versus large business. It's not a far cry to see that small churches are struggling because a lot of large churches have gained notoriety and. But on the matter of immigration, I mean, I think we all can reach out and think about. All of us can think about ourselves and our forebears, the folks that came here to America, that eventually led to us being here. And in my case, my dad's parents came from Ireland soon after the turn of the 1900s,
mine came from Italy around the same time.
Yeah.
Well, not my parents, my grandparents.
Yeah.
Grandparents. Yeah, I'm. Let's see. I'm third generation in this country, second generation born in this country.
Yeah. And we're kind of fortunate in a way. We're very fortunate that that the same thing that's happening now to folks coming from Central America, from Latin America, from Mexico, and some other countries. That the same thing that's happening to them didn't happen to our folks, because it very easily could have. Because Irish people, every group that comes here, runs into a lot of hard questions, a lot of.
Well, you know, the regulations that they have right now are regulations that have been in effect for a significant number of years. They're not laws per se. I mean, they're not the kind of things that require incarceration, the gas chamber, or the electric chair. Rules and regulations are set up for purposes of control. And one of the things that we talk about, we say, well, they're breaking the law. They're not undocumented. They're illegal. Well, you know, if you really want to go back and talk about what's legal and what's not legal, a ways back there was a war with Mexico. A good number of years ago, there was a war with Mexico, and Mexico lost the war. Well, after the war, it was time to draw up some boundary lines.
Yep.
Now, I'm retired, but I used to be in the title business, which meant that I would do legal research.
Yeah.
I would have to examine surveys, I'd have to examine deeds, I'd have to come up with what the legal situation is, so that when purchases or people who were going to finance had to buy title insurance, well, the title insurance company had to know what the heck they were insuring.
Yeah.
And so, I'd have to present a report. Fine. It either went to the title insurance company or went to an attorney. It's neither here nor there. Well, anyway, Mexico decides it's time now for a title search. The war's over. Where's the line? Well, legally, the line was the Nueces River. The legal line was the Nueces River.
Yep.
Well, Mexico lost the war, so the victor at the time, Texas, the United States, they said, no, we don't want the Nueces River to be the line. We don't care what the law is. We're going to make it the Rio Grande. Now, it just so happens that a lot of Mexicans, sometimes they go across the Rio Grande. And we claim illegal. So it's not a question of legality or illegality. It's a question of rules and regulations. And when you have 11 million people here in this country right now that can contribute to the benefit of the country,
and they do.
And they do. Okay? You don't just deport them. Okay? You reform. Immigration reform. That's what we should be looking at. So,
if I could segue just briefly onto the economic pacts that have been signed over the years, going back into the 90s, there was we of course now have the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which we personally think is wrong because it again damages American workers, and in fact damages workers from a lot of different countries. It really stifles the ability of workers to get a fair wage everywhere in the world.
Well, you need a balance.
Yeah.
Because right now we live in a very complicated world. It's not foreign and domestic anymore. It's domestic and global. All right. So I can see where President Obama feels that with the rise of Asia in economic growth, we have to be tied in with them in order to create favorable trade relations. Unfortunately, in our eagerness to cash in on a potential Asian market, we forget about some of our American workers. So it's not so much creating trade relationships abroad. It's creating trade relationships on an equal playing field so that rules and regulations for their employees and labor laws for their employees are on a par with the ones that we feel exist for ours. And therefore, there's a better balance. Otherwise, what happens is industry moves over there and exploits over there for their own profit, and they could give a damn about the workers here. And we should have learned from that. With NAFTA and the earlier trade agreements.
Yeah, NAFTA is actually the trade agreement that created a lot of the migration of people from Mexico to the United States, because NAFTA did horrific things to Mexico's corn and tomato crops in terms of their ability to sell them to the United States. And that's what's caused a lot of the migration from Mexico to here. Likewise, CAFTA, Central American Free Trade Agreement, is responsible for a lot of Central American people coming here looking for work.
So complications that we've created in a lot of ways have contributed to what we now consider to be a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem of our making, in the sense that of our government signed treaties which have led to this. In the same way that invading Iraq led to the migration of 2 or 3 million Iraqis to Jordan and Syria, which has led to destabilization of those countries, which has led to the current situation with Syrians and Jordanians and others making a death-defying trip to Europe to try to escape the ravages of war. These are consequences, and I think, again, leading back to our candidate for president, Bernie Sanders, Bernie understands that there are consequences that you have to look at when not just making trade agreements, but when you engage in nation building and deposing leaders like Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi. And,
in one of his David, in his debate with Hillary Clinton not too long ago, when he was trying to show the importance of being extremely discriminating,
cautious,
when dealing with political issues, and not necessarily adhering to pundits such as Mr. Kissinger, Mr. Henry Kissinger, whom Hillary felt she could rely on. Well, Hillary, she's created some experience for herself, and it's to her benefit, and I would say that it's probably to the benefit of the country as a whole. But that experience, when examined under the question of judgment, how good were her calls? There were quite a few calls that were not necessarily, in the best interest of the country.
Yep, deposing Gaddafi left a vacuum, and you always hope that there's going to be elections that are going to make a country better.
Even in Iran, Bernie Sanders was talking about an election that had taken place. The United States at the time was not in favor of that president. They had that president deposed and put in the Shah. The Shah turned out to be extremely corrupt. That corrupt government justified the rise of the Ayatollah Khomeini, and bingo!
Well, the powers that be at the time in America, I guess their response was, well, he's not just corrupt. He's not just a corrupt dictator, he's our corrupt dictator. He's on our side.
Yeah, well, that kind of mentality is something that we have to get over. All right, and if he is corrupt, he can't be on our side. It's not going to work for us in the long run, because the people are going to make a mental note of that.
Yeah, we have to stand up for what we believe in and support or not support countries around the globe based on our ideals.
And if you go back far enough, there are instances, even with regard to Cuba, that led to the rise of Castro and the eventual break between Cuba and the United States. So, we're not innocent pawns. In many cases, we contribute to our own problems. That whole business in Iraq, fine. We actually honestly thought that we could create a stable democratic government in Iraq after the Saddam Hussein was deposed of. Well, you can't have a democracy unless you have an electorate that is capable of instilling it and preserving it. I mean, right now, in this country, all right, we are supposed to be a democratic society, and to be honest with you, our democracy is in serious jeopardy, because our democracy relies on an enlightened electorate. And when you look at what's going on in the Republican camp, I mean, it's unbelievable. It truly is. I watched some of the Republican debate. As far as I'm concerned, I can see where Donald Trump comes from. But when I saw Marco Rubio engaging in Donald Trumpism, I kind of scratched my head at first, and then I was totally embarrassed. I was embarrassed. I mean, these characters are vying for one of the most important positions in this country, president of the greatest country in the world. And and the kind of behavior that I'm seeing, the kind of language, the kind of civility that was going on between these two characters was saddening, to say the least. I mean, you've seen any of that stuff?
I have, and I've been looking at and trying to figure out what motivates people to be attracted to Donald Trump. What is it about him that people find attractive? And it turns out I read an article that makes sense to me, and I can't give you a reference point on it. But if you Google why do people like Donald Trump, I think you'll find some articles that talk about how he appeals to people who like heavy-handed authority figures. There are people that like to be told what to do. There are people that like to be pushed and shoved around. They like bullies. They think that that's a normal part of their lives and of our lives in general. And turns out, in interviewing people, exit polling from the primaries and the caucuses, they interview people. They've interviewed people in both parties. Now, there's no third party to interview, so you're kind of stuck with that. But they've interviewed people. They interviewed people from the Republican Party, and determined that.
5 minutes.
Okay, and determined that that about 35% of Republican primary voters like that kind of authoritarianism. They like that model of the bully who tells them what to do.
They're shirking the democratic responsibilities. They are responsible.
It takes the power out of their hands and gives it to somebody else.
Yeah. Well, what they're saying is, in fact, is listen. I can't do it. I'm not interested in doing it. It's probably rigged. You're probably rigged. You're a pretty good blowhard. Well, you managed to get your name in front of me often enough, so maybe you and your ability to handle business and money, maybe you can handle the job. Forgetting about the fact that it's our job. Okay. It's our job.
Okay, not a surprise about maybe 35% of Republicans, because that's about where Trump is ending up in terms of popularity, although it appears the other 65 or 70% of Republicans hate him. So it's either love him or hate him on the Republican side. But interviewing people that are Democratic primary voters, apparently about 17% of Democratic primary voters follow that same line of thought, where they like to be told what to do. They like that authoritarian figure telling them what to do. So all in all, say 35% of Republicans, about 17% of Democrats. That averages out to about, say, 25% of the American electorate that likes that kind of a leader. Well, thankfully, 25% is not going to win you an election.
You know, if you really want to think about the best possible system, the best possible system would be a benevolent dictator. Unfortunately, dictatorship and benevolence rarely go in hand.
They don't, do they?
So, you know, I don't think you're really going to benefit, from a big boss, a dictator, a bully. And there was also concern about, why the American public is tolerating the kind of discourse that they're hearing from the Republican Party. And what I've heard, I'm sorry I can't state my source because I was just picking it up recently on the radio. But it was an excellent point.
You do a little checking, do your own investigation, because that's always the best thing to do. Don't take anybody's word for it. Fact check, counter fact check, and find the sources that seem to make the most sense to you. And again, then fact check.
Right. Well,
then fact check them.
Check the sense of this. The fact that civil discourse has somehow or other declined throughout the society. People feel they can say whatever they want when it comes to the social media, when it comes to texting, when it comes to Twitter and what have you. You can say whatever you want. And if you can say whatever you want, and if you can be as inconsiderate and as disrespectful and as bullying as you can be and get away with it, well, hey, there's a shortcut. I don't have to think. I don't have to know about the issues.
Okay. We're going to come back and do a second show where we'll continue the discussion until we fade out. But
so you don't have to know about the issues. All you have to do is denigrate your opponent by throwing mud at him.
Yeah.
And you're not seeing that. You're not seeing that in the Democratic campaign.
Where do I hear people say that they're fed up with political correctness, that they don't like political correctness, that somehow, and I guess a parallel to political correctness is politeness, where you don't just say what's on your mind and be as horrible as you can be and as mean-spirited as you can be. If that's the opposite of political correctness, I like political correctness, at least being polite.
You got a point
in discussions.
You're absolutely right, and it's more than just being polite. It's like it's being sensitive. I turned around to a friend of mine. I said, "Listen, you're a cripple. Maybe I ought to give you a hand." And he says, "Joe, no, you don't understand." Oh, we don't.